Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Special Programs and Community Engagement for the Arizona Attorney General's Office. I manage the Opiate Abuse Training Program statewide effort with a focus on the faith community statewide. Before we get into the business today, I would like to have Pastor Davis to come up and do the opening prayer for us.
You guys, let's pray. Father in heaven, we just bow our heads before you this afternoon. We thank you that we come before a God who does all things well. And I thank you that you're always leading us, always ahead of us. And Father, for this afternoon, for this purpose that everyone's gathered here for, the opiate craziness that's going on, an overwhelming epidemic in our country. Father, we know that none of it catches you by surprise. And so I just pray that in this moment, in this space, for those who have come to provide the training, that you'll give them wisdom and guidance, that what they say will be from your lips and from your heart, and that those who are gathered would have their attention fully focused on the training and the insights that they gain from this. Father, we pray for those beyond these walls who are caught up in this great addiction and this terrible life and challenge. And we ask your mercy and grace upon each of them. They're not just a mass of people, but each individual is precious to you. Christ died for each person. And so we ask in the name of Jesus that you would go from heart to heart, soul to soul, and body to body, Lord, and that you would bring healing, that you would bring deliverance, that you would put them in the way of your grace and your mercy, and people that love you, and so that they might find a way out and a way to healing and peace and a new life. So I just commit this time to you and ask that you would be honored and glorified in it, that you be pleased with everything that you see and hear, that you would anoint those who will be leading the training, Lord, that they would speak clearly and be led by you, and all ears would be open to hear what you have to say through this training. We love you, we adore you, we give you thanks. Thank you for saving us and giving us new life and new hope. We ask and pray these things, Lord Jesus, in your name and for your sake. And God's people said, amen. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Pastor Davis. Before we get into the meat of what we're about here today, I want to share a personal situation. This past Thursday, I had surgery to remove a growth which had been diagnosed as stage 1 breast cancer. There was no cancer in the lymph nodes or the surrounding areas, and I urge all men over the age of 40 to start doing self-breast examinations if you're not doing that. And the reason that I was able to catch it early is that I do self-breast examinations. This coming Wednesday, I will start radiation 5 days, twice a day, 5 minutes on each segment. And at the end of the 5th day, I will be finished with the process. As I indicated, there was no cancer in the lymph nodes or any of the surrounding areas. And the reason being is that we caught it early. And I want to, since there's an abundance of men here today, follow my lead. I ask you to do that because it's vital to your health and to the health and safety of your family. If you can catch cancer early, regardless of what type of cancer it is, you can deal with it better. And we certainly caught this in the opportune times. When I first found out, from the diagnosis, from the biopsy, I sent out emails to just about everybody I could think of. And a lot of folks were feeling sorry for me. And I tried to explain to them that don't feel sorry for me. I'm in good shape. God is using me in order to make this situation happen. I caught it early. I'm passing that information on to others, and you can turn around and do the same thing. So I'm right now, unless something dramatically happens, I'm way ahead of the game. And as I indicated, I'll be starting radiation on Wednesday and everything. Based upon all of the data and information that we've gotten back, I'm in way ahead of the game. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank Brian Lassen, for the Director of Security here, for helping us to get this program off the ground, and also Jennifer Grant. She attended a presentation that we held on July the 2nd at First Pentecostal Church. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And Brian, thank you for all the things that you've done. And we'll keep pushing to make this work in the future. So because we didn't have a huge crowd today, don't let that get in the way of what we have to do. Opiate abuse problems are going to be with us. Fentanyl is here to stay unless we tackle it. So, and that's what we plan to do going forward. We will certainly be look forward to work with North Phoenix Baptist Church to expand so that we can get more people involved in this process and save lives. The unfortunate part about what's happening, the fentanyl is being distributed heavily to our young folks across this country. Our daughter lives in Inglewood, California. Earlier this month, they made a bust there of 1 million M30 pills, 1 million M30s, and you're going to hear more about that in our discussion today. That's a frightening amount. I think that's the largest bust that I've seen in the United States. And our state is being flooded. And because of COVID-19, it slowed our progress down in terms of dealing with what we were trying to do initially. We're now just getting cranked back up again, and we hope to be at full speed in the next month or two. And we were working on a situation where even if COVID raises its head again, we'll be able to put on presentations. We'll have a tape of our presentations so that you can play it in the various churches, synagogues, mosques, what have you, and then we can come on and do a Q&A via Zoom after that. In this way, we don't get people exposed to COVID and any other communicable diseases that might be out there. With that, we'll get started with our process here today, and I'd like to introduce Reverend Tina Marie Reeves. She's with the United Methodist Church, and her presentation is going to be identifying persons abusing opiates. Reverend Reeves.
Thank you, Fred. I'm really short. I'm going to bring this down now. All right. Well, good morning. It is really good to see you here. And you may be wondering how you are going to do anything to meaningfully address the opioid epidemic. Surprisingly, our faith communities are uniquely poised to help stem the tide of opioid abuse and overdose deaths, because you see, our faith communities have crucial information about the people who are at risk for addiction to opioids. That's because we have the prayer list. You know who has asked for prayers in your community because they are ill or having surgery, folks who have a loved one who is injured or chronically ill. And that list of people, the folks who are on our prayer lists, those are the folks who are often at greatest risk for opioid addiction and death from overdose. You are far more trusted as their friends and faith leaders than any other individuals or medical professionals who they might encounter who might try and intervene. Now, the best way to stop opioid addiction is to prevent it from starting, so let's talk about common risk factors. The first and most powerful risk factor for opiate addiction is receiving a valid prescription for opiates from a doctor. This can be for pain relief after surgery, after an injury, or for relief from chronic pain. Current estimates state that between 26 to 44% of people who are currently addicted to opiates became addicted while using their prescription medication. That's 1/4 to almost 1/2 of opiate addicts who became addicts simply by following their doctor's orders. A second powerful risk factor is having prescription opiates present in the home, and this refers to the risk known as diversion. When someone, often a family member or a family friend, browses the medicine cabinet looking for medications that look like they might be fun for getting high. This means that the person who's been prescribed to take the opiates, their entire family, all of their friends, and anyone else who might visit their home is at risk for addiction as soon as the prescription is present in their home. Now, it's important that you realize that the risk factors for addiction from diverted opioids are very great because they are probably being used recreationally. And I would add that most people who are recreationally using prescription opiates are not taking them orally as prescribed. They are crushing them, and then they are injecting, snorting, or smoking them, which greatly increases the risk of overdose and death. Believe it or not, an inhaled drug, a drug in smoke form, is far more powerful than any other form of that drug because of the immediacy with which it is absorbed. We need to look at other red flags that someone in your faith community might be dealing with addiction. Addiction is wily and silent, and it sneaks up on folks before they realize what's happening to them. It's a long time before the addicted person realizes just how much trouble they are in, and about 2 to 3 times as long as that before their family and friends realize how big the problem has become. Addiction is stealthy, but it does have a few telltale signs that come on earlier in the addiction process. The first telltale signs of opiate addiction include deviation from medical directions for usage, increased usage, and increased tolerance for that medication. This can be summed up as needing increasingly strong medication and amounts of medication to manage pain without any advance in the disease that is causing the pain. Other red flags of addiction include continuing use of opiates despite negative life consequences such as a lost job or a failing relationship, increasing irritability and escalating levels of confrontational behavior, increasing isolation from family and former friends, increased financial difficulties that may require rescue from the faith community, and lying about whereabouts for circumstances of their behaviors. The red flags of addiction in teens are different because they might begin to isolate from their original social circle but gather a very different and less desirable set of friends. Their grades will slip. They'll have a hot temper and be belligerent, more than the average teen. You'll notice a decrease in their extracurricular activities if they had formerly been active, and it is likely that they will begin to sneak out at night and steal money and other saleable objects from their siblings and their parents. The red flags of addiction in seniors include increasing secretiveness, increased isolation from friends, family, and their faith community, decreased interest in former pleasurable activities, increased irritability and anger, decreased appetite, and other symptoms that you might associate with depression, such as a sense of hopelessness about the future. So, what do you do about all of this? Well, remember, you've got your prayer list, which indicates to you who is at risk for addiction. And it's time to take that knowledge and get bold. The intervention that we suggest is going to involve a face-to-face visit, because it will be easier to say and do what you need to say and do if you are face to face. And right now you are looking at me thinking, Tina, that's not going to happen. There is no way that I'm going to do this. And let's be honest, a conversation like this will not be easy for you. You will feel uncomfortable. You will be fearful that this person is going to push you away and become angry with you. And how exactly do you open this conversation? Well, I have a suggestion that might help. I have a friend who works at one of the Phoenix hospitals training chaplains, and she has this amazing method of starting uncomfortable conversations. She will look at the person and smile and then say, I need to say something to you that may be difficult to hear. Is that okay? I need to say something to you that may be difficult to hear. Is that okay? Saying something that blunt and obvious prepares the person and gives them a chance to say, no. To admit that they are not really ready to hear anything that is uncomfortable. And if they're not really ready to hear difficult words, then don't share difficult words with them. If they don't want to hear it, then they're not really ready to do anything about it. And it would be better to wait or talk to a family member or a good friend. And that's really all it takes. I need to say something to you that may be difficult to hear. Is that okay? One sentence. And it opens the door to everything that comes afterwards. Well, what's your biggest challenge once you get this conversation started? Getting them to believe that they are at risk for anything. If they are at risk for addiction, well, they're going to poo-poo the idea that that could happen to them. If they are at risk of someone diverting their medications, they're going to think that their family, their kids, their friends are all way better than that and would never take their medications without permission. And if they are already addicted, they're going to be full of excuses why they are not addicted, why they genuinely need their medication in larger amounts and way more often. Your best weapon is information and honest but gentle confrontation. Now, when it comes for the risk of addiction due to diversion, you have to remind people that nobody wakes up in the morning and says first, I'm going to become an addict today. Yeah, that's what I'll do. Nobody wakes up and says that. And they also never wake up and say, today I'm going to leave my medication out on the counter in the kitchen so that teenage girl who my son likes so much can take a pill and then overdose and die later this week. Nobody ever says that, okay? Nobody plans this stuff. It just happens when we're not looking. So when it's time for this conversation, you are going to need to bring a few things with you. One is your notes from this presentation, because, I'm sitting here with an iPad in front of me. I'm not making this stuff up off the top of my head. This is a lot of info. You'll need your notes. You're going to need information about small home electronic safes, like the ones you find in hotel rooms. You really can get them yourself, and you can find them at Harbor Freight or Home Depot or even at Walmart, and you can buy them online at Amazon. And they're not terribly expensive. And why would you need them? Well, the best way to prevent diversion of medications is to lock up those medications that are attractive for recreational use in a safe. And the only person with the combination to that safe is going to be the person who needs the medications. As a side note, these safes are really great for locking up knives, other sharps, and dangerous over-the-counter medications like Tylenol when someone in the home is seriously depressed and suicidal. You're also going to need a dose of Narcan, either the one you received today or one from Sonoran Prevention Works or from CVS or Walgreens. Now, you need to be ready to discuss what is known as iatrogenic addiction. Iatrogenic addiction, otherwise known as an addiction to a prescription that was received for a legitimate medical condition. Your friends and faith community members do not want to become an addict, but they sure can get there by accident. People become addicted because they overuse their medication in an attempt to just keep functioning on a daily basis. They just want to go to work, pay their bills, and take care of their family. So don't tell them not to take their meds. Tell them to be wise and to talk with their doctor about alternative methods of pain relief and when it will be time to switch to those methods of pain relief. Alternative pain relief methods usually includes a mix of different methods, including non-narcotic pain relievers like Tylenol or ibuprofen, lidocaine patches, meditation, massage, Reiki, yoga, acupuncture, Tai Chi, self-hypnosis, and sometimes even medical cannabis. Now, it is really important to remember that God created all of these things, and that includes the opium plant that gives us opiates and the cannabis plant. And God created all of these things to be used for our benefit, not for our harm. That is right in the book of Isaiah. So when the opiate medication that we use for our pain becomes more harmful than helpful, turning to the other things that God created for our benefit is a wise thing to do. And the more safe methods we have for relieving our pain, the better we can manage our pain. The more options, the more relieved we feel that our pain can be managed. Now, when it comes to the risk of diversion, you will need to remind the person you speak to that all human beings have a side that we are not proud of, that does things that we are somewhat ashamed of. Even close friends and family members can be tempted to divert medication. Not because they're bad people, but because they're human and they want to escape the pain that they're in, whether that pain is physical or emotional. Now, some of you may fear that you will offend people when you speak to them about addiction. They may feel accused or singled out. They may feel that you have a really low opinion of them. Be ready to assure the person that you speak to that you would not even bother to speak to them if you did not hold them in very high esteem, because this is a difficult subject. And then be bold. Don't be afraid to make people angry with you for speaking up. When I was still an intern in ministry, someone told me that in order to do good ministry, I had to be willing to make people angry at me. Of course, they didn't say it quite so nicely. What they said was, if you aren't pissing people off, you are not doing good ministry. And I know that every last one of you wants to do good ministry. Speaking out like this is hard, and you will not always be well received. Neither were the prophets. We must be bold for the sake of our God and for the love of our community. So be bold and remember this sentence. I need to say something to you that might be difficult to hear. Is that okay? Last, I would like to introduce you to some resources for information on and treatment of addiction. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, is a part of our federal government, and the resources that they have are comprehensive. They have information on treatment centers all over the United States. Now, I know we're sitting here in Arizona, but I want you to remember that addiction often develops in people who have underlying issues that are not directly about their addiction. For instance, veterans who might be suffering from injuries and war trauma and PTSD will need treatment for their addiction, and they will also need treatment for their trauma. And it is crucial to find a treatment center that meets the addict's individual needs for treatment that is comprehensive. And you also need to find a center that will work with the family's financial limitations. And it is our good luck here in Arizona that we have a host of treatment facilities and programs that can be discovered through the Arizona Opioid Assistance and Referral Line. While Arizona treatment facilities will also be listed on the SAMHSA website for Arizona, the Arizona Opioid Assistance and Referral Line provides information about local outpatient treatment programs for adults and adolescents, as well as the inpatient facilities that will be listed on the SAMHSA website. Additionally, there are many good substance abuse counselors in Arizona, as well as a host of compassionate and effective trauma counselors. And many of these counselors are available through your Faith Community Members Insurance Program. So helping your community members sort through the list of counselors they receive from their insurance company can be a huge help when they are overwhelmed with their own needs for treatment. Thank you for listening so attentively and for attending this training. May God bless you and walk with you as you serve your faith community and the people of Arizona.
Thank you, Reverend Reese, for always an outstanding presentation. Our next presenter is Mr. Doug Larson. Doug will be speaking on a father's experience. Doug he and his family lost a son to opiate abuse, and Doug is also a member of St. Luke's Saints. I'm sorry, All Saints Lutheran Church. Doug,
Thanks, Fred.
thank you.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. And I'd like to throw some kudos to Fred for discussing breast cancer amongst men. That takes some nerve. Very nice. We're here to discuss the opioids. It's a tragic epidemic that's killing thousands of Americans every single day. We've been trying to shed a light on this now in our little group for a few years, and it seems like it's getting worse. The situation has gotten much worse because of the introduction or the common use of fentanyl in all these drugs, and that's what's happening is fentanyl is being used everywhere. What we're going to discuss today, what we're going to discuss today is what are opioids, what's causing the problem, what we can do about it, and the first thing I'd like to explain is that this is definitely an epidemic. I got 3 short videos I'm going to run here. I'd like to start with the first one here, but I want to show this is an epidemic we're dealing with.
The United States of America is writing a prescription for pain that is wiping young people like me off the map. Our addiction to legally prescribed pain pills, like oxycodone or hydrocodone, is leading a lot of us straight to heroin. That's because prescription painkillers and heroin are both opioids. So when we can't get a refill, heroin is the only way to stop our pain or to get the same high. And heroin's less expensive and easier to get. I can have black tar heroin delivered to my house faster than a pizza. Once we start, we have to keep using. Not for the high, but because we get sick from withdrawal if we try to stop. It's an epidemic. We're rich, poor, and middle class. We're from farms, cities, and suburbs. We're from families who had big hopes that we'd live healthy lives and not fall so far from such a high.
What opioids are, basically they're a highly addictive drug that attaches to the receptors in your brain, your gastrointestinal tract, and in your back. So it's pretty much everywhere in the body. And what happens when you get too much of this drug in you is your body slows down. That's what happens where it's estimated about 25% of people who try an opiate get a good feeling from it, and it slows everything down in your body. And basically, in an overdose situation, it'll slow your body down to where you'll forget to breathe, and you go into a sleep that you don't wake up from. A little bit briefly about my story. I lost my son Preston. Our son Preston, his mother is here today. In 2016, it was back, we had gone through about 5 years of fighting this battle with him. To the best of our knowledge, the only time we know that he started using the opiate was when he broke his wrist when he was a teenager. The doctor said, use Percocet. We assumed the doctor knew what he was talking about. I had no idea what Percocet was other than it was a drug that would help him with the pain. If I'd known what I know now, I would have told him you can have 4 ibuprofens every 6 hours and don't hit an inanimate object again. But we didn't know that. And so on March 15th, I talked to my son on my way back from Albuquerque. That evening we were chatting about the program he was going to start the next day, which was going to be out of state because we wanted to get him away from everybody he knew. The next morning, my other son and I were at my office waiting for a call from him, and instead we got a call from his mother. Preston was in the bathroom. The door was locked. He was on the ground. She couldn't get in the room. She'd already called 911, so we rushed right out there just in time for the fire department guy to tell us that we'd lost him. That is one in a number of thousands every day. Our family took a hit we'll never get over. And every family that loses a child goes through this kind of a hit. The opioid problem with the fentanyl involved in it is just making it vastly worse. These are different opiates. They're synthetic and organic. Of course, this is a few of them. There's also, Percocet and methadone. Some of these drugs, methadone is a drug they use to help people get off of an opiate, which doesn't exactly make 100% sense to me since it's an opiate, but that is what they do. And if you look at the molecular makeup of an opiate, you can see that it's virtually the same as codeine or hydrocodone. It's all the same drug. It's just, when they invented opiates, the idea was to come up with a drug that would help people that were in a stage 4 cancer situation where it didn't matter if they got addicted to something, it was that powerful. And that's where it all started. How they're abused, a lot of it, like Reverend Tina said, starts with just a simple, you go to the doctor, you go to the dentist, and you have some kind of a minor surgery and you need a Percocet or a hydrocodone or something like that. And it helps with the pain. Like I said earlier, there's a small percentage, about 25% of people that try it get a real comfortable high from that drug. Comfort makes them very comfortable. Those are the people that are in danger of becoming addicted. And then what happens is if you get past that where you start needing more, you can go to where you're, like she mentioned earlier, you can smoke it or snort it. And what you do is you crush the pill, you bypass the time release, and you can get a quicker hit. And then there's injecting, which is probably the most dangerous because it brings up other things. You can get dirty needles, HIV, a hepatitis. A friend of mine, Rhonda, lost her son about the same time I did to a disease called sepsis. He had been on the street for a few years. They had chased him around everywhere in the west part of the country. Finally found him in California. 82 days in an ICU unit, and then he passed away. His name was Brandon. She'll never get over that loss. I can understand that. But California paid for 82 days of an ICU. So you can see where the expense of this becomes drastic. This is the real problem. The real problem is the fentanyl being added in. What happened is the cartels, they used to sell a lot of marijuana over the border and things like that. Can't do it anymore because it's legal in most places. So they moved to cocaine or heroin or meth. And then they found that it's a lot easier to produce this, cutting it with fentanyl than with like a poppy, for heroin you need a poppy field. It's a big field of plants. A lot easier just to get 1 kilogram of fentanyl will make over 500,000 pills. So they found that to be a much better way to get it. Not only that, but fentanyl now, it did mainly come out of China. That's where it started, it coming to the United States through Mexico. Then what happened was the Trump administration, one of the things they did do well, they stopped China from allowing the sale of fentanyl. They made it illegal to sell fentanyl. So what they did was they started selling the chemicals to make your own fentanyl. So now you can actually order fentanyl, the products to make your own fentanyl, right from Amazon or Alibaba, or even I've heard on Facebook. But you can order all these things yourself. The danger in this is these pills are being made in garages or anywhere, not in a lab where it's safe. And that's what's causing the overdoses now that have gotten to a ridiculous level. Here are some pills you're looking at in that picture. Half of those are pills from a pharmacy and half of them are pills that were made. You can order a press to press your own pills that say Xanax or hydrocodone or Percocet on Amazon, and you can make your own pills. They'll look exactly the same. So what they're saying now is they figure an average of 40 to 45% of the pills that you buy illegally on the street have a lethal dose of fentanyl in them. And the fentanyl problem has gotten much worse. It's more than doubled from 2020 to 2021, the deaths in the United States from fentanyl. More than doubled. And why people start using the opiates? Well, obviously it's the prescription use. And then I go back to, there's mental issues that do it too. By the way, just a little quick side note, the new suicide hotline is 9888. So you can dial that number and it goes directly to the suicide hotline now if you know anybody in a situation like this. But in the case of my son, there's a picture of him up here. He was diagnosed with body dysmorphia. He walked into an Arco gas station one day, saw a video camera that was taking video, and thought his face looked sideways, oblong. So he went into this situation where he thought that he was so ugly that every time a girl saw him, she was repulsed, and any guy that saw him wanted to fight him. You can look at him, he was a real good-looking kid, certainly above average, but by no means any kind of a disaster that he thought he was. We think this is one of the things I found, and I've worked with the Salvation Army, the people that go there. I've worked with Fred's program for a few years now. I've met a lot of addicts. One thing that they all say is they want to feel different. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone that wants to do drugs. It could be someone that's just upset about the way life is treating them, the way they feel about themselves. And a lot of people have self-doubts. Why they keep using them? Well, there's you develop a tolerance to an opiate. If you take an opiate pill today, tomorrow you may need one pill. The next day you might need 2 or 3. In a couple weeks you might be taking five times a day. And what happens then is you run out of them. Then they doctor shop. You try to get a different doctor to give you a prescription for the same thing. It's getting tougher and tougher because that's all becoming electronic, so everybody knows if you've used another doctor. Then you go to the street. That's where it becomes deadly. Once they get on the street. The withdrawals, again, remember, this drug is in your back, it's in your stomach, and it's in your brain. So it's going to hurt everything. When you go through the withdrawals from an opiate thing, it's a quick withdrawal. It only lasts about 3 days. But it is probably been described as being 100 times worse than the worst case of the flu. The emotional addiction, though, that's forever. You're just stuck with that. This is the next video. It's a guy named Nacho. He's just talking about what it's like to go through the withdrawals.
I had gone through tons of withdrawals, times where, you're sick. It feels like 1,000 times worse than the flu. You're sweaty. You're trying to get through anything. I would walk into class, in these withdrawals, and I would go through this horrible week. And, never going to do this again. And 2 days later, I'd already made it through the acute withdrawals, but I was using again, knowing full well that I'm going to have to go through that again at some point. I wish I knew really what these prescription pills were. These are all synthetic forms of heroin.
How big is the problem? Well, and you can see on that it shows that 48,000 people died in 2020. In 2021, for the first time, over 100,000. There was actually 107,000 deaths from overdoses in 2021. That works out to about 291 a day, or you can break it down to 12 to 13 an hour, or 1 every 5 minutes in this country somewhere. Some families going through the same tragedy, and I don't know what we can do about it, but talking about it's a first step. We do have a couple of suggestions we're going to come up with. This is overdose. We stuck this in there just to show that the problem with the fentanyl really started to kick in December of 2018. From that year to December of 19, we had 73,000 deaths. Just a stat I wanted to show. These are the main lines of drugs that come in to Arizona, and you can see that Arizona as well. Arizona is actually considered like about the worst state right now for fentanyl use. They've actually stopped enough fentanyl. In one bus, they stopped enough fentanyl coming in through the border to kill every person in America 7 times. So there's a lot of it here. And really the new drug pusher now is social media. So I talk to my grandkids. You can talk to your kids, your grandkids, anybody you've got something to do with. But if you can let them know and discuss it, and I'll come back to this in just a minute. But Snapchat's the #1 social media platform now. Then it goes Instagram, TikTok, and last place tied basically is Twitter and Facebook. But they're out there. And how much it's costing? Well, you can look at this right here, and you can see the amount of money. They're talking about $1 trillion in 2020. basically, the last calculation I saw is in an average, in a year right now, it's costing about $3,000 per citizen of the United States. The money being spent when you calculate the hospitals, police, courts, jails, 30-day clinics. We put my son through a couple of 30-day clinics. That cost a lot of money at that time for us. And then Salvation Army, which was a very good program that was free. But we tried too. It's very expensive. This is probably the most important thing I'm going to show you in the program, and that is to talk to the kids. I raised 3 teenage boys, and I have seen how they can kind of tell you that you're old, you don't know what you're talking about, that kind of thing. They're maybe not paying attention. But we recommend, and this isn't our recommendation from what we know, but talking to the kids, setting expectations, letting them know what you expect is probably the best thing you can do to help them. In a survey done of several thousand high school kids that did not use, the number one reason they gave for not using, I didn't want to disappoint my parents. So no matter what, keep talking, because even if they act like they don't care, they're hearing you. And they know. And they were, open-ended questions, which are questions that don't have a yes or no answer. They've got to actually explain, but try to get onto their level if you can when you talk to them. These are the kind of things I saw. These are the things you don't ever want to see in your house. The marks in the arm, the different aluminum foil and the spoon that they use to melt the stuff so they can put it in an injectable, and missing items. My son, he works for our family business, and we have a vending company. He never would. He used to actually put money back in some of his bags, some of his own money, because he thought we paid him too much. He would never have stolen from me. And nobody I know, save maybe my mother, had my back like he did. But when he was using, I found hundreds of dollars of ones underneath his bed sheets and stuff, and it just wasn't the same person. This is the last video. This is a story about a guy named Aaron. You can see him sitting, a healthy-looking guy. He went to a pill party where they just take pills, believe it or not, and put them in a bowl, and they take a few and they take them to see what happens. He took some pills and went to sleep. They tried to wake him up. He wouldn't wake up. So they got the mother, because he wasn't at his own house. She tried to pour ice water on him and get him awake. He didn't wake up from that either. Finally, they got scared and called paramedics. And here's the story.
He was full of energy.
Full of energy and loved to wrestle and goof around and
Play. He was very lighthearted, fun child.
I didn't know what he was taking. He was 220, handsome. The addiction is so strong. These kids don't know how to handle it. Ready to get in the chair? It's a fine mess you got us into, isn't it? We'd much rather have Aaron like this than dead. And a lot of parents don't have that luxury. We can kiss our son at night. What a life, huh? Dad shave you in here? You like shaving? One yes, two no. No.
The worst consequence is death. Other consequences are, like Aaron, trapped in your own body, alive, but still unable to communicate the way that you would hope that you could. You also lose all of your hopes and dreams and things that you wanted to accomplish in your life.
You can help.
Did you ever think anything bad would happen taking prescription pills, Aaron? 1 for yes, 2 for no. No.
Help save kids from prescription drug abuse. Secure your medications and talk with your kids. Visit.
Okay, that goes into Save a Life. I'm going to brief over this because we have a professional Marine's going to be up after me and talk about Narcan and what you can have. We are going to give everybody 1 dose of that. I've also got a couple of flyers up here that are going to be posted at the end. Anybody who wants to can take one. It just gives a little bit of simple information on what you can do to help protect a family, or if you know someone that's got problems. There's QR codes on both of them to get help, which is something I would have loved to have had back when I had the problem, because I had no idea who to call. You don't want to call the police because you're afraid you're going to get your family in trouble, and I didn't have any idea. But they've got a thing called PAL Group, which is a huge help for a family who's going through the struggle, because they can tell you what you can do and they can help you, give you some ideas, and really be a big help. And then they've got programs to help your person who's in the addiction situation. This is just a law that made it legal for them to allow anybody to buy Narcan without a script. I'd like to go over this real briefly. This is, it says treatment options. You don't want to wait till rock bottom, because in most cases with these drugs now, especially with this addition of fentanyl, rock bottom is death. That explains why we've got more than 2 times the amount of people dying last year than we did the year before. It's becoming so dangerous that anything you buy on the street is kind of like Russian roulette, only you've got a 6-shooter with 3 shells in it. You spin that baby and you pull the trigger. Your odds aren't good. And if you know anyone who's in this kind of a situation with a family member, this PAL group is something they need, because it's a 24/7 nightmare. When you're in it, I mean, I'm not even going to go through any of the stories, but they were some ridiculous situations that you just can't believe you got yourself into. And I know that I never shied away from it. Like, I never was afraid to admit that it was heroin that took my son. I just was worried about trying to help him. These different programs here are the QR codes I've got for you on these flyers if you want them. Just different programs you can get for some help. And this program is put by task. Last page here, what you can do if you're a parent or a grandparent or a caregiver to children. You can talk to the kids, set expectations, keep the drugs safe from the kids so they can't get them, because they will sneak. And if they get a prescription themselves, you manage it. You don't let the kids manage their prescriptions. They know, and if the doctor is going to give them an opiate, you decide whether that's the best thing. Someone's got to make that decision besides them. They may not know. Healthcare providers, you would hope that they would not only be able to tell when someone comes in with an addiction problem, but, when you're in the hospital with a person that's overdosed, you're scared. If it's your family member, it'd be real nice if that healthcare professional could give you some good advice on what you could do. Educator, teachers, I think it would be important if teachers were aware and they see something different. They see a kid start acting different, start picking new friends that maybe their parents wouldn't want them to have. They see something like that, it might be a good time for someone to contact the parents and say, hey, just heads up, there's something going on. And law enforcement, again, if they can, they know what's going on, so knowing someone's in an addiction and having a problem with that, they can get them to the right place and maybe give advice to the family, because, again, you're scared. That's it for me. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Very briefly here, I told you about my situation, and I was prescribed some opiates, and they prescribed 28. I've taken 3, and I'm not taking any more. The first one that I took, I said, wow, you have to be very careful even when you're prescribed opiates, because this was my first time using opiates. And as I indicated, I took 3, and I'm fine. I'm not dealing with any pain, so I'm not going to take any more. But be careful, and whatever the prescription says when you receive opiates that have been prescribed to you by a doctor, follow those instructions, because you can easily get into trouble taking prescription opiates that are prescribed by your physician. Our next speaker is Mrs. Marion Rowland, RN, BSN, CSP. She's the managing director of Banner University Medical Center, Phoenix Poison and Drug Information Center. It's all yours.
Thanks, Fred. I apologize. So, as Fred said, my name is Maureen Rowland. I am a registered nurse and C-SPI, which is a certified specialist in poison information. So we have 2 poison centers here in Arizona. I'm just going through, okay. two poison centers here in Arizona. The one that I work at is Banner University Medical Center, Phoenix. That's where we're located. Our center covers all of Maricopa County, and then there's a poison center in Tucson that covers all the other counties. But we do work together as a system to make sure that everyone in Arizona is covered by a poison center. We're a little different in the sense that most of we call them SPIs, Specialist in Poison Information. Most of the SPIs at our poison center are registered nurses, whereas the Tucson Poison Center, they're run out of the College of Pharmacy, and they're all pharmacists. So we manage cases a little bit differently, but again, we work together as a system. Our physicians, we always have 24/7 toxicology backup. Our physicians do admit patients at Banner University Medical Center, Phoenix, which is exactly where my rattlesnake victim is headed right now. And then we also have admitting rights at Phoenix Children's Hospital. The Tucson Poison Center, they do consults, but they do not have an admitting service. So there again, as we work as a system, we often do have patients that are brought to us from outside of Maricopa County. And, I don't want to go over this, again, Doug really covered this very well as far as what is an opiate, but I just wanted to show a quick picture of essentially the original opiate. And see the sap that's along the sides there, that's where we're getting the drug from. So this is a natural form of opiate from the poppy plant. And these are just examples of legal or prescribed medications, and then we also have our illicit. And again, we talked about that, the fentanyl. I'll go into a little bit more of that. It's been a huge problem. As Doug mentioned, 2018, poison centers, we are actually seeing it a little bit before then. The thing with fentanyl is it's not on your normal average urine drug screen in a hospital. It's not picked up on that. So poison centers, we started getting calls from emergency room physicians asking, what to do with this overdose patient that just came in that looked like an opiate overdose. They had the pinpoint pupils, decreased respirations, but the urine drug screen was negative for opiates. And so that was where we, as the poison centers and emergency rooms, first started seeing this come around, where we had to do more comprehensive testing and realized that this fentanyl was out on the streets now, and people were overdosing and dying from it, and we just weren't picking it up. So I think even earlier than 2018 is when we started to kind of figure out that there was something out there. 2018 is really when we kind of caught on with the testing, so we were able to determine that it was actually fentanyl. I'm sure you've heard in the news too, carfentanil. So we have fentanyl, and then carfentanil is about 100 times more potent. That's essentially, it's an elephant tranquilizer. We have seen carfentanil here in Arizona. Extremely dangerous. As Doug mentioned too, these drug manufacturers, I guess I could call them, illicit drug manufacturers, are catching on to, how they're potentially getting caught with the DEA, so they're getting more creative. And we see this with other drugs as well as fentanyl, where we're starting to see just slight deviations to the chemical structure of it. So it's getting more and more scary as they deviate from actual fentanyl to these kind of Frankenstein-like drugs that we're going to start seeing. I was actually just at a conference where we were discussing some of this with the DEA, because each state, or not DEA, FDA, because each state is a little different with marijuana laws, and they're starting to see this with some of the hemp production and the marijuana as well, too, as drug overlords and manufacturers are trying to beat the system. So we have a lot of these different variations that we're starting to see out on the streets. It's really scary. So again, what do they look like? We can have natural forms, we can have the prescriptions, illicit heroin. As Doug mentioned, heroin is still a huge problem on the streets. The thing is fentanyl's in heroin. Fentanyl's in pretty much every drug on the street right now too. We have methamphetamine, crack, cocaine, all of those are tainted with fentanyl. Somebody thinks that they're getting high on crack, and then they're overdosing on fentanyl and showing up in the ED. So it's pretty much nothing is safe on the streets right now. I also have 3 teenage boys, and talk to them till I'm blue in the face about that they just cannot trust anything. It's not like when we were younger, in high school, and there was like beer at the party or something like that. Now with these kids, anything is considered to have fentanyl. So it really is Russian roulette. Those M30s also that Doug was talking about, I'm sure you've seen on the news, these busts, they're coming through pretty much every day. I think our borders, we're doing the best we can, but it's very easy to sneak this across. You can go down to Mexico and purchase this M30 pill for $5. And, so kids go down there, spring break, whatever, buy some, bring it back, sell it at their high school. Again, we're doing the best we can, getting a little bit better. This is just an example of, again, the Russian roulette that we're seeing. These are not professional pharmaceutical companies that are making this. So you can buy that pill press, and you have no idea how much fentanyl is in that little blue pill. So you could be at a party and somebody's handing them out. One person has 0 fentanyl in their pill. The other person has enough to kill everyone in the room. You just don't know. Luckily, here in Arizona, we have passed a law from a senator, and I forget her name right now, but she did help to pass a law after her son passed away from a fentanyl overdose, and I believe he thought he was buying a Percocet, and he died of a fentanyl overdose. So they have now made it legal to get fentanyl strips here in Arizona so that you can test your drugs to see if there's fentanyl in it. The only problem with that is for drug seekers. They're actually seeking the fentanyl. So initially they were dying of overdoses of fentanyl unknowingly. Now they know fentanyl's in there, but they don't know how much. So the strips are great, but in the same sense, people are still using it. The state is also doing some really great advertising to try and make people aware of what this is, this M30, so that, again, they can talk to their kids about it, that they know what's out there. Again, Doug briefly touched on opiates and what they do to the body, where the receptors are. So the big thing with opiate receptors are the respiratory depression. So when they attach to those receptors in your lungs and stop you from breathing, essentially. So Narcan, onto the end here, Narcan. It is a lifesaver because what it does is it knocks the opiates off of those receptors. So it's an antagonist. It knocks them off. That's why we need to administer it as soon as possible. IV is really the best way to do it. We have, we do have the intranasal. That's probably the safest way. So that's why we like to hand out the intranasal ones for you to have. If you do have somebody in the home that's on like high dose opiates, though, you can get those kits. That's the slide that Doug showed earlier. Those kits that have the IV or IM. That's going to be a better response. But the intranasal does work very well. The thing to remember about naloxone or Narcan, and naloxone is just the generic name, Narcan is the manufacturer, that it only lasts in your system about 60 to 90 minutes, and most opiates last a lot longer than that. So just giving the one-time dose and reversing somebody is not enough. 911 needs to be called immediately because they're likely going to go down again. That's one of the things that we often see in emergency rooms. Somebody goes down on the streets, fire will bring them in, they are reversed, they're now awake and angry because they're having some withdrawal symptoms, they sign themselves to AMA against medical advice, they sign out, and then they go around the corner and then they go down again because the Narcan is worn off and their opiate hasn't. So really important to make sure that you're calling 911 if you do have to administer it because, again, likely that opiate's going to last longer. Oh, and also just to mention too, it's not going to reverse the side effects of the overdose as well. One of the biggest things we do see is aspiration. So they're choking on their own saliva, vomit. So identifying an overdose, and this is, I think, a great venue for it that Fred has talked about with churches because people do come here for a safe haven. So there is a high likelihood that you might see an overdosed patient or overdosed person that is coming here to seek help or shelter. So identifying it, they're unresponsive, slow, shallow breathing, might have a blue tinge to their lips or their fingernails. Limp body, slow or no heartbeat, and very small pupils. The differences between a high and an overdose. So when they're high, they're still going to be a little bit more alert, while lethargic, they're going to be responding to you. Normal heart rate, normal skin tone versus overdose, where again, you're having that pale gray, blue skin, lips, nails, unresponsive or minimally responsive. Sometimes you get like this kind of gurgling sound when they're unconscious, essentially. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that if you see somebody that's down, and this is again not, this is pertaining to somebody perhaps here in the church or on the streets. This is not necessarily a loved one that might be in your home, but make sure the scene is safe. So make sure that you feel safe approaching them. If they appear to be asleep, try to wake them. You can do a sternal rub. That's a great way to try and rouse somebody. If no response, then this is an emergency and we need to call 911. So again, just like if anyone's been trained in CPR, call 911 first before you start doing anything else. We need them to start responding. You can also, as you call them, put it on speakerphone so you can still be talking to them as you're trying to respond to the situation as well. And tell them where you are. So the naloxone, Fred, I hate to, are you giving one, is there 2 in here? Yeah. I'm just gonna, do you have any open already, or? That's all right. And the boxes are great too. They do have instruction on the back, and YouTube has some really incredible videos that go over it as well. So you'll take it out, and anyone that's familiar with like Afrin or any sort of a nasal spray, this is essentially the same thing. So you want to remove the outer packaging. Please do not try to test it. I know it's hard not to because it's a plunger and you just want to do it, but if you do that, then you no longer have a dose. So resist the urge. Finger placement, again, just like you would with a nasal spray, you're going to insert it about 3/4 of the way into the nostril. Don't worry, as far as going too far or too low. Just try and get it about halfway to 3/4 of the way. Again, just like you would a nasal spray. And then you administer. You just plunge it in there. After you've administered it, though, you want to put them into a safe position. Again, like I talked about, one of the biggest things we see is aspiration. And as Doug was talking about, too, with some of your withdrawal symptoms, they're likely going to vomit. So you want to make sure you get them onto their side. We want to make sure that they don't choke on that vomit if they do have it. Wait about 2 minutes. If they've not responded, we're going to administer again. So like I was talking about before, IV or IM is going to be a little bit more effective than an intranasal. So if it is a true fentanyl overdose, you're probably going to have to administer again. So if you have another naloxone package, then you would want to administer it at that time. CPR, if you know it, again, if anyone who's taken a CPR class, they'll talk to you about as far as making sure you're safe too. So we do worry about, of course, any sort of, we're not going to want to do mouth to mouth if we don't know this person. We worry about, cross-contamination, things like that. So if it's your loved one, though, of course, you're going to start CPR. So it's kind of a little bit of a different response, but you could always still do compressions, though, too. If anyone, again, if you've been trained in CPR, compressions, just to try and keep that blood flowing. Again, same thing with rescue breathing. And then again, back to the withdrawal. So after you've administered it, we are likely to see some withdrawal symptoms. When this opiate crisis kind of started, there was a lot of fear with giving people Narcan. I know school nurses, police officers, a lot of people, they were a little fearful because the misconception that if you administer it, then they're going to become violent. They're going to wake up, they're in the withdrawal, and they're going to become violent. That can happen. Usually it's in the emergency room, and usually it's because a much higher dose of Narcan's been given and it kind of jolts them, and usually they have other drugs on board too. So the likelihood of somebody becoming violent after you've administered this is actually pretty low. They're going to be feeling way too crummy, and it's just not enough of naloxone that's in there that's going to totally put them into that state. And again, the video that Doug showed was showing as far as the brain injury that can occur. So we have hypoxic brain injury and anoxic brain injury. So hypoxic is when they're having that very slow, laborious breathing, kind of that gurgling and whatnot. And then you have anoxic brain injury when they're not breathing at all. And you can have brain damage occurring within 4 to 5 minutes. So it's very, very important, again, that you're calling 911 immediately so that they can get en route, because again, they're probably going to need a little bit more of that Narcan. And then going back to the The aspiration, pulmonary edema, is one of the most common things that we see in overdosed patients, opiate overdose patients after they've been reversed. So again, importance of getting them to the hospital as well, because they're going to have some secondary infections. Sepsis is also huge. We do have laws that protect you here in Arizona, so you can administer the naloxone. I don't know if this was going to play or not. We'll see. This is just the Good Samaritan law. No, it's okay. The Good Samaritan law in Arizona, though, just protects you as far as if you're going to be helping and assisting. So they have a little bit of a, I guess it's not going to go. They have some PR going out there because they want police officers, especially, they want people to know that they will be protected to help. This, again, is just talking about what we're seeing here in the state. The numbers just keep going up. As Doug mentioned, we're doing the best we can to try and get information out there. But this is an epidemic. In Arizona, we are the gateway. So even with amongst poison centers, we've been talking about the M30 pills forever now when we have our national conferences, and we're telling all of our other poison centers, there's 55 throughout the United States, about this. They're starting now to see it in their states, whereas we've been battling this for a long time now, but it's coming up through us. The Arizona Department of Health Services does have an excellent website that has a lot of information on the stats that we're seeing here, and then also links to resources. I just wanted to put this up here as far as location of overdoses. A lot of them are going to be in a personal residence. So as Tina was talking about before, these are going to be friends, family, people you know. So again, have those hard conversations with them, but then also be prepared again if you are active in the church community. This is the other area that we're going to see them. So public places. So just the take-home points, be ready, have your naloxone, be careful now in the summer heat. I would not recommend leaving it in your car. It's just way too hot. So that's to keep it in your purse or in your, again, depending on your situations, but purse, pocket, just don't leave it in the car. The heat will not be good for this. It will not keep it stable. Know the resources in your communities and keep yourself safe if you are assisting. These are some great resources that we have as well. Tina had mentioned the opioid assistance and referral line. That's actually managed by myself, the two poison centers of Arizona. So again, we are expert matters in this. A lot of our physicians at BUMCP, Banner University Medical Center Phoenix, are addiction medicine specialists as well. So we always have a physician that's a backup for us too, because we do get a lot of calls, not just from the public, but from providers that need assistance on helping to taper people down and that type of thing, or find help. The naloxone kits, Sonoran Prevention Works offers them, but you can purchase them at any pharmacy. There is a charge at the pharmacy. Sonoran Prevention Works usually has them that you're able to get for free. And then Fred just asked, real quick, that I talk about this too, that you guys are going to be getting this Datura drug deactivation system. So this is a great way. We get a lot of calls at the Poison Center with people who've had somebody maybe that passed, that they have their medications and they're wondering, how do I get rid of them? So this is a really great product that you can use to deactivate those medications and then throw them away. They also have an excellent website that has a video on how to use it, and then also FAQs. So if you have any questions as far as can this medication be used in this system, that type of thing. And you can always call the Poison Center. We are 24/7. We, like I said, here in Maricopa County, we're all registered nurses. Our partners are pharmacists, but we can answer questions at any time and assist in any way, 24/7, completely free. Do you guys have any questions? Yes. The Narcan, so I believe these ones are this one expires 2025, so they're about 2-3 years. Yeah, but again, like we say in the Poison Center, when people, if you have it and it says it's expired, still try to use it. Don't, it's just the efficacy of the drug is lost, but most still have some efficacy. So, but yeah, it's about 2-3 years. Again, making sure that you're storing it correctly. For the Narcan, yes, because it's specific to those receptors, so it's knocking them off. We do have tramadol, I think, is the one that has some opiate qualities. That's kind of, the research is still a little out there as far as the efficacy of using that to reverse a tramadol overdose. When we get the calls, we usually say you can try to use it, but it's not as effective. So it's really specific to opiates. No, and that's actually, we had a tragic event where we had a young child that had gotten into the parents' I think it was an M30 actually, and paramedics actually responded, and we do a lot of training with them, and I don't want to blame them, but they were concerned about the dose and they didn't want to give it because they were worried and if they gave too much and that type of thing. But no, if it was not an opiate, it would not hurt them. So that's why we always say, just give it. And that's the last lecture we did, someone asked too, like, how do you know if they're having like a heart attack versus, this, and it's not going to hurt them to give it. So just give it if you're suspecting it. Yeah.
Any more questions? All right.
Is the diet pill Fentenal related to Fentenal at all?
Could repeat the question.
It is not. So fen is more like the PHN, and it's more of a amphetamine. So it's in the spelling. But yeah, and that's not as. I got to tell you, my background is neonatal intensive care and then pediatrics before I went to the Poison Center. And when I first started at the Poison Center, first of all, I was amazed at the quantity, the dosages that adults got. I'm like, how much are you giving them? Because I'm used to little 3-pound babies, and so that, and then all of the drugs. The United States, and part of here with this opiate crisis is we love pills. And so even kids now, I actually just did an interview a couple weeks ago on melatonin, because melatonin's it's natural, it's a hormone, it's okay, take it and help you go to sleep. We shouldn't need to take a pill every night to go to sleep. Some people do, but if you're, the average healthy adult and child, because they're really pushing this on the kids now too, help your 3-year-old go to sleep and give them a little melatonin at night. We need to get away from having to take a pill to go to sleep, to take a pill for anything, So going back to your question, we have so many drugs out there in the United States that we take for various reasons, multivitamins, the melatonin, like everything. I actually just got back from Europe, and it's amazing the difference from going into one of, they have the grocery store, but then they have little kind of clinics, they call them. And all of their, if you wanted ibuprofen or something, they're in little blister packs, and they sell them you can get a pack and it's 10 in there, and that's it. Here you can go to Costco and you can get the thing, yeah. So they don't deal with the, especially the suicide attempts, but they don't deal with the overdoses like we have here in the United States. And it's availability, and it's the habits that we're forming, especially with our little kids. We need to get away from them thinking that they need to take, something for every little problem that they have. Granted, I do understand there are some medical problems and people do need to take some prescriptions for various things, but that's again, I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we're in this problem that we are here in the United States.
Any more questions? Doug?
Yeah, just one thing I thought of. We were when we were going through the learning process of this stuff. They told the survey showed that over 80% of the pain medications written on Earth are written in the United States. So we do way overdo it. And I know years ago, when my mom was going through some situations, we met a Dr. William Hitt. He was a award-winning doctor in the United States. He said that any parent, any doctor that prescribes Ritalin should be arrested. And that's one of the things, like Maureen was talking about. We get so many pills. You got a kid that's a little out of control, throw Ritalin at him. You really got to think about those kind of things.
Okay. That's it? Okay. Well, thank you very much, and we greatly appreciate everything that happened here today, and we look forward to working with you in the future. We have some Narcan for distribution to you. Please see me before you leave, and Brian, does all your crew have a distribution? Okay, I just wanted to double check. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to our crew.